We're recording. Yeah, 50 years later, the Buffalo Springfield still have it right. Something is happening here, and it's not exactly clear. And Retake Our Democracy in this radio show, in its blog, in its statewide alert system, and in its seminars tries to help you understand what's going on and give you the tools so that you can go ahead and take action. Good morning. You're listening to Retake Our Democracy, a 30-minute weekly show that airs on KSFR 101.1 FM or streaming live at ksfr.org. The show is on at 8:30 every Saturday morning, goes from 8:30 to 9. And KSFR is our Santa Fe public radio station. And interestingly enough, today I will be interviewing Peter Smith, the president of the KSFR Board of Directors. But that isn't why I'm having him on the show. Peter is also a former Republican lieutenant governor, state senator, and U.S. House representative from Vermont. And at the GOP Republican National Convention last month, he joined Republicans for Biden. Enough was apparently enough. And so in just a minute, we will find out how this Republican felt that he could no longer support the president. Last week, I interviewed Joe Maestas. He's the former city councilor for and mayor of Española, and a former city councilor from Santa Fe. And he is the Democratic candidate for the PRC and PRC Public Regulation Commission in District 3. And given that the composition of that district, he is like 99% certain of getting like 65% of the vote and will become our commissioner. And so we spoke to him about how the PRC functions, the many challenges it has faced historically and even currently, and the strategy that the governor is employing to change the not the composition, but the way in which the PRC commissioners are appointed. She would like to have them appointed as opposed to elected. And we talked about all of that. And if you're interested in hearing that, you can go to ksfr.org, hover over the actions and events page menu on the home page, and you'll see Retake Conversations. And that's where you can find all the Retake Conversations going back to April. And for earlier shows, you'd have to go to ksfr.org. And if you're driving around in your car right now and you wind up having to run into a store or to a curbside and pick something up, and you miss some of this show will also be available on on retakeourdemocracy.org midday Saturday. So before we turn to Peter, though, I want to alert you to a couple of opportunities. First, Retake has launched a transformation study group, which currently is comprised of about 20 researchers. Some of them are actually, experienced researchers, and some of them, probably half of them, are simply people who are reasonably smart and very interested, or very smart in case you're listening, transformation study group members. And we've been meeting for about 6-8 weeks now. And during that time, we've created all the tools and templates and shared understandings of what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is examine about 15 different areas of public policy and develop well-researched briefs that would outline what transformational change would look like in those sectors or in those policy areas. And we will be publishing those individually and as a collection, with the individual briefs being published beginning in probably November, and the full thing being assembled sometime in 2021. This is really exciting conversations and work. We meet twice a month on Zoom, and the conversations are very stimulating. The people are quite smart, and the work is advancing very quickly. So if that's something you might be interested in being part of, just go to Retake Our Democracy, write to retakeresponse.org. That's retakeresponse. That's wrong too. retakeresponse@gmail.com. It's an email, not a website. retakeresponse@gmail.com. And we will be in touch with you. we would really welcome more people involved in that. And while you're at the website, you may also want to take a look at our election strategies. And we have a full toolkit with 4 strategies. We just updated this on Thursday. So it's very up to date. Our election strategies make it very easy for you to get engaged in this election. And in case you aren't paying attention, this is a pretty big deal, this election. This is probably the most important election in my lifetime, almost certainly. And we have to, this is all hands on deck, folks. So you got a comfort level issue about making phone calls or texting or whatever, get over it. I'm serious. We have to save this country. So just go to our website and there's an election menu right in the banner, and click on it and you'll find all you need to get into the game. And finally, I want to remind our listeners that on Tuesday, September 15th, our Zoominar will begin at 6:30. Our panel will focus on water challenges facing New Mexico. And what I'm learning that's truly shocking is the degree to which New Mexico is challenged in managing its water. According to our conversations with Representative Melanie Stansbury, actually legally, New Mexico can't manage its water currently. And so we're going to talk with 4 New Mexico water experts and about this situation, because you know, in case you haven't paid attention to this either, we got a drought going on, and if we can't manage our own water, that's a big problem. So we have the foremost expert from the legislative perspective, Representative Melanie Stansbury, on the panel, and joining her will be Norm Gaum, who is the former Interstate Streams Commission director and also an expert on water management. And joining him will be David Gutzler, a researcher and professor at UNM. David's work has been on predictability and variability of weather and climate and extreme events. And then the 4th panelist will be Teresa Cardenas, who is the founder of the Noble Renewables Group of the West. And that's a social enterprise advocating for environmental and social change. And she also is the current president of the Middle Rio Grande Water Advocates. So that's a very good panel we have put together. It's probably going to be, for very obvious reasons, one of the most important discussions Retake has ever hosted. And so you can go to retakeourdemocracy.org and hover over the actions and events menu, and just, you'll see right away the September 15th Zoominar will appear, and you can just click on it and you can register. So that's all the information I'm going to share with you today, except I'm going to have a conversation with Mr. Peter Smith. Okay, let's get started. Welcome, Peter.
Oh, it's good to be here. Thanks so much.
And Peter's joining us from Vermont, and boy, does it look green.
Yeah, right.
I always like to let our guests introduce themselves. So Peter, can you tell us a bit about yourself? You've had an interesting journey, starting with a career in education policy, then elected to elected positions in Vermont as a Republican, moving here to Santa Fe, joining the board of the SFC of the KSFR, and now apparently a member of Republicans for Biden. So fill us in on this little journey.
Well, it's about 6 journeys all wrapped into one, but I'm from Vermont and from a family that has been in Vermont. We are sitting here just taking stock of the enormous privilege we have had. My family's been in Vermont for 200 years. And when I came back from college, in a very odd sequence of events, I ended up being the founder and then the founding president of what is now the Community College of Vermont, which is a statewide college, no campus, very few faculty, permanent faculty, using very community-based 12 learning centers, now connected by technology. And I did that for 10 years, retiring when I was 33. And it's a very unlikely story, but it worked. And so that was then in the late 70s. And I I wrote a book. I got my doctorate, part-time program, and then got into politics. And I spent 10 years in politics as state senator, lieutenant governor, and then member of Congress. My footnote in political history is that I lost to a guy. I was the sitting congressman, and I had come out in favor of banning semi-automatic assault weapons in 1989. And I lost to a guy named Bernie Sanders, who the NRA concluded was less of a threat than I was.
I think they got that one wrong.
Yeah, they certainly did. But anyway, so, you know, I hated losing. I didn't mind losing for the reason I lost, because I really had a conversion on military weapons. And I just, you know, I think the subsequent 30 years have borne me out on it. I then went back into education, and I was at George Washington University for 3 or 4 years. And then I was the founding president of California State University, Monterey Bay, a brand new institution. And I was there for 10.5 years. Really, it's become an absolutely wonderful place. I mean, when you start things, they aren't wonderful on day one, you know, but if you get the basics right, and then other people come along and expand on your work, and it's just incredible to see what that place has become. I was then at UNESCO in Paris for 3 years as the head of the education division, and came back and worked in higher education again. I went to Kaplan, the proprietary university, because I had worked for community college at State University, a private nonprofit, and I thought, what the hell, I'll give it a shot. And I was there for a few years and then moved, and I'm now at the University of Maryland Global Campus, which is public, accredited, individual institution, 100,000 students on 4 continents. And I think the connective tissue throughout my career as an educator has been working adults. Right now, we're deep into the vulnerable populations that have been so brutally exposed by this pandemic. They've been right in front of us for years. Some of us were a little slower to understand it, maybe. I've been working with adults. The college I started in Vermont, we started with 25 Head Start mothers in a child care center in northeastern Vermont. And we assessed their prior learning, and then we moved them forward. If anything, that's the connective tissue, is underserved adults especially, but underserved people. And it's been a hell of a ride. I was once introduced as a man with a great future behind him. And when I think about it, that may very well be true. Anyway.
Well, I think you took a bold step in Charlotte, but well, first, I just want to ask, did you vote for Trump in 2016? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
No. I can tell you, generally, I don't discuss my votes just because as a matter of principle, but I absolutely did not vote for Trump in 2016. And, you know, my alienation from what the Republican Party was when, and it was beginning to not be when I was in the Congress, and that was really when it turned. But my alienation from that kind of thinking occurred significantly before Donald Trump got the nomination. But no, I just thought he was awful. Now I know he's dangerous. And and just to clear the record up, I was not in Charlotte.
Okay.
You know, the Biden people put that group together, and I was happy to participate. And I'm also a member of the Lincoln Project, which I think is really telling some serious truth about the pickle we're in, and it's a serious situation.
Yeah. I don't know whether you saw it, but in the New Mexican, there was a little article. That's how I found out that you were Biden for Republicans. Yes. And there were comments below, just at the point that I looked at it, just 4, and it was Republican, like not exactly PhD level Republicans saying things like, Rhino and go back to Vermont and, not focusing on any issues whatsoever. And so I'm wondering, to what degree do you feel like things like the Lincoln Project and the Republicans for Biden will be influential among other Republicans? And I'll just add to that a little bit. We have neighbors who are good friends of ours, and they are Republicans and very conservative, and yet they'd come over to our house for dinner, and we really liked them as people and stuff, and they knew we were running the Bernie Sanders campaign, and lo and behold, one day they showed up at a potluck at El Museo in Santa Fe for Bernie. And then we were having a house party where we were going to have Sanders on the TV, and they came to that. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, they told us that they had changed their registration to Republican, and I mean to Democrat, so they could vote for Bernie in the primary. And they said they'd vote for him in the election. But when he did not win, they voted for Trump. And they still, when I sent to them some stuff from the Lincoln Project, because I don't give up, they were just like, I don't care what those rhinos say, So how do you feel? How effective do you think and there's sure a lot of Republicans standing up and taking the stand you have. How do you think that's going to play out?
I think it is substantial, but I don't think it is. It should not be confused with guaranteeing Joe Biden victory. I think this is something we have to worry about in terms of getting the vote out. The obstructions that are being conducted on a daily basis. The one today, where they say they may have a vaccine by the 1st of November. It's just. It's a very perilous situation, but I think it'll help. I think it normalizes the notion, what's important to me, it normalizes the notion that you can, on principle, disagree with someone that you may have agreed with before. To me, it's much more serious than that. I think that what you see with Trump, the way he does business, is the tip of the iceberg. But the 7/8 that you can't see is undermining constitutional government every single day and weakening people's faith in the news and science. You see the racism is just vituperative and plain and clear, and so. But it's happening so consistently that you almost lose track of
Right.
how it is. So for me, look, I lost my seat in the United States Congress on an act of principle, in the sense that I looked in the mirror one morning, having had a conversation about guns with a teenager from an African-American young woman from Washington. And I went home and I just said, you're going to be looking at this face for the rest of your life when you shave in the morning, and you're going to have to like the guy you see. And I paid for it. So I think I can probably sound a little self-righteous to some people, in the sense that for me, this is a matter of principle. And the fact that the party has migrated, when I went to Congress, well, Republicans wrote the first environmental laws in Vermont. I mean, they founded the movement in 1968, 69, and 70. We were pro-choice, and there was no problem with it. We supported the United Nations. And now the whole thing is just, when Newt Gingrich became the minority whip, and he had the Koch brothers' money behind him, and they took the party over step by step and have taken it down a rabbit hole. And I'm just stubborn enough I vote for whoever the hell I think is the best person. And unfortunately, that hasn't been a Republican in quite a while. But I do not give them, I don't give them the pleasure of telling me what I am and what I am not.
Okay. Well, I got to take a moment here, Peter. You know, you're familiar with this drill. I got to remind our listeners,
Yes.
it is times like these that KSFR is so important to our community and to you personally. We bring such great programming, whether it's music, news, art, culture, all with a New Mexico spin. And but they operate on a tight budget, but they still need funds. So for those
That,
who can afford it, please consider making a contribution by going to ksfr.org, clicking on the donate button, giving them 10, 20, $50, and just viewing it as sort of your ticket to admission to some really great programming. And so I just wanted to take a moment to remind.
amen, brother. You know, I say, Paul, uh, I don't agree with everything I hear on KSFR, and that's what I like about it.
Right. Yeah, you've told me that about our show too.
Exactly. Yeah.
But,
I mean, it's fine.
today we're talking with Peter Smith, the president of the KSFR Board of Directors and a member of Republicans for Biden. So let's get back to the question, the conversation rather. So this is the question I've been aching to ask you, and I'm even aching to ask it more after what has transpired so far. Given that the Republican Party, and you've noted since Newt Gingrich, it started this slide, but boy, oh boy, has it slid into an abyss. And given that, how come you haven't just gone, rather than Republicans for Biden, I'm a Democrat for Biden?
You know, it's a great question, and then maybe it's just that I'm perversely stubborn. I don't know. Um, uh, but the fact of the matter is, I did have a number of people, and I agreed with them. Democrats approached me and say, uh, "You are a Republican in the older sense of the term. The Vermont Republican Party was always very progressive, and we need your voice as a former Republican member of Congress." And these are Democrats expressly suggesting I not switch parties. Now, people can have their own opinions about that. That, for me, that made sense. You know, it's the old line, I didn't leave the party left me. I don't know where it's all going. And if the Lincoln Project turned into something, you know, that looked like a political party, I might, you know, follow that flag. But for now, I grew up in a place where we embraced paying taxes. We did not outsource government to third parties. You know, George Aiken was the founder of rural electric co-ops in rural Vermont. He was a Republican. He was the co-author of the food stamps bill. And that was the way I was raised. And so I'm just stubborn enough to say, I'm speaking from that perspective. And I have migrated. You know, if you don't learn, as Benjamin Franklin or Winston Churchill or somebody said, if you don't learn and grow, you've got your eyes shut and your mouth closed and your ears blocked. So, you know, I readily admit that I've changed. Numbers of my positions have evolved. So be it. That's what being alive and alert means in my mind. But when I see somebody undercutting the Constitution on a daily basis, in little ways and in big ways, to me, that's just not something you can be quiet about.
Okay. So based upon what you've said so far, I'm guessing you must support the governor's pretty strict shelter-in-place policies and mask policies. Is that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, it isn't that science always gets it right the first time, but, you know, I believe in the press as a third party. And I don't mean political party, but as the fourth
Right.
estate. I believe, I mean, there are things that I just I count on in data, science. In this case, the governor's background in health, I think, was enormously helpful. I know it's been brutal for people. It's been brutal for people here in Vermont, where we have a Republican governor who's done almost exactly the same thing that our governor has done. And he, interestingly enough, is not going to vote for Donald Trump and didn't vote for him in 2016. But if you just take a path of random activity, which is what they're preaching, we just have to be observant and pay attention and do the right thing. You're asking for trouble, and we're getting it big time. No, I think the governor has been absolutely terrific.
Okay. So what is your view? The Republican Party here in New Mexico hasn't viewed her as being absolutely terrific. What is your view of the Republican Party in New Mexico?
Well, I place the people I hear about in the Trump trough, and to me, anybody who is willing, either if they believe in what he's doing, that's almost worse than being politically cynical and saying, I'm going to hold my breath until this guy goes away. Either way, what I hear coming out of Yvette Herrell's mouth or Steve Pearce's mouth, I find utterly contrary to any Republican principles or, frankly, political decency principles that I have ever engaged with. And so, to me, they're operating, and I could say the same thing about virtually every United States senator who's a Republican. They know better. They know better. And this isn't about conservative versus liberal. This is about using government to cheat and violating the Constitution.
That's well said. Well said. So we've obviously seen our country turned against each other by Donald Trump and his hateful rhetoric. How do you see us reconciling, hopefully after a November 3rd win by Biden and then a January 20th inauguration?
Well, this may sound, this could be stuff of another whole show, and which I'm not looking for, don't get me wrong. I really think that the Democrats have to do something that the Republicans have refused to do, and that is identify, I'm going to say there are 15 areas like emoluments, like appointments, where he's fractured the appointment process but cynically, and they have to pass laws that apply to both parties, but that clarify the expectations. Campaign finance reform is critical. If we don't get large silent dollars out of American politics, we're gonna be in trouble. But I think they need to pass a series of laws that codify what we mean by appropriate behavior if you're the president of the United States, and they have to apply across the board. In other words, there has to be what's good for the goose is good for the gander. What I hope they don't do is retaliate against the Republicans the way when Mitch McConnell says, my job is to defeat Barack Obama. That is absolutely not his job. His job was to lead the United States Senate. And so somehow we've got to avoid retaliating and create a legislated playing field where the assumptions that Trump has been able to employ because before we relied on decency or, just people knowing what the right thing in general was to do. I think we're going to have to codify a lot of that stuff so that nobody can ever do what he's done. Nobody can ever do it again.
Okay, well, we've got a few more things to discuss, but we're out of time for the live radio show. We'll be back next week at 8:30 on Saturday with award-winning climate crisis author Dar Jamal. And if you fail to see our post on Friday, it features his withering attack on the governor and all other agency directors who are supposed to be regulating the gas and oil industry. I could not recommend the post more. So check that out at retakeourdemocracy.org. And if you are wanting to hear what Peter thinks is going to happen in the 2020 election, you'll have to go to KSFR, retakeourdemocracy.org, hover over the actions and events page and go to the Retake Conversations, and you'll find the recording there. And thank you very much for being with us today, Peter. We're going to pause for just a second and then we'll resume the conversation.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, so we're back, and this is now the podcast. And so you were starting to talk about different ways in which the Democratic Party, rather than taking revenge, would need to just create legislation that clarified a lot of ways in which government operates, so that it is clear and cannot be as easily abused by either side. I'm wondering how, and that I could see happening. I actually could see either happening. Whenever you see a redistricting thing come up, the party that was to punish the party that had been in power, and gerrymandering is the result. But I would agree with you that revenge should not be the goal, that the major goal needs to be to reunite. But one of the divisions that I feel is going to be particularly difficult is the race issue, because Trump has played this so egregiously and so immorally that right now we have, you know, African Americans scared to death when they see blinking lights behind them, and protesters now starting to wonder if doing their constitutional right of protest could wind up with them getting shot by a white vigilante who would then be praised by the president. So that's going to be a really tough one. I can imagine, for example, on election night, if Biden has 56% of the vote and a clear majority of the Electoral College, the president saying something to the effect that this has not been a legitimate exercise of democracy, and we need to take to the streets, or we're going to the courts, or what have you. And it could get really ugly. How do you see us ever fixing that divide?
Well, I have sort of three different reactions to the sort of multiple scenarios, but it's all got a consistent DNA that you're suggesting. First of all, if Trump tries to resist in any way, assuming that she's reelected and the Democrats still hold the House, Nancy Pelosi will be president on the 20th of January. I mean, I honestly don't think that, and I don't think that the Secret Service or any of the people who are endowed with the responsibilities that are generic and not specific to any one person would never let that happen. Number two, I think there are going to be some aftershocks from this, and I think the issue of weapons and militia are going to be one of them, and I am very, very afraid of what may happen with people who simply take to the hills, and you know, they've been out there, but they've never been encouraged before, and they have been encouraged. And I can tell you only that the next president, if it's not Donald Trump, I hope, is going to have to have a strategy, because what they're doing at a certain level, if they in fact did what you're describing, is treasonous. It is against the law. And so I think on issues of race as well, there are certain things we simply can't buckle on. And I think the time has come for us to own the debt that we have created with African Americans, and to understand the role that privilege plays. And I'm very busy understanding my own share of that, and doing something about it. And I think it means health security. I think it means housing security, and I think it means income security of some kind. And I think it's going to take higher taxes on people who make more than $500,000 a year. And to me, those are things that we see just as clear as day, that we live in a place where not everybody has the same opportunity or even a minimally secure circumstance. And, you know, in my field of education, Paul, when you study why people leave college, the vast majority do so for non-academic reasons.
Right.
And it's income, it's food insecurity, it's housing insecurity, it's something happens in their life, or as an adult, they get divorced or they lose their job. It isn't that they're stupid. We've got an enormous amount of talent walking around this country that we have failed to recognize. So to me, I think there are going to be people who will be, if not permanently, substantially alienated by what a new administration has to do, given the circumstances that they inherit. But when I talk about not seeking revenge, I'm talking about legislating a behavioral playing field for how government operates.
Right.
That doesn't operate on norms that we have now seen can be thrown right out the window. But I think we're going to have to see legislation, and Republicans are going to have to decide whether there's any connection between their philosophy and rebirthing the nation or not. And if there's not, I think the party is dead. I think they are dead.
Yeah. So one last question for you. How do you see the election playing out nationally and in New Mexico? And assuming we elect Biden, are you optimistic about our future as a nation?
Well, take a hell of a lot more optimistic than I will be if Donald Trump wins. And I think we're being introduced to ourselves in a way for the first time, maybe the first time in 100 years, first time in my lifetime. There's a reckoning going on that I think is very, very powerful, and it's human. It's a human reckoning. And I think it has to happen. The question is, how far can we take it? How far can we play it through to a better, fairer society? I think I don't know enough about southern New Mexico. I'm very hopeful that the three members of the three Democratic candidates for Congress will win. I'm pretty sure two of them will, and Social, I hope will. I think the senatorial race will go well. I think the governor's going to be, no, she's not up. So to me, and I think Biden will carry the state. I think the nationally, it really comes down to, you know, we don't need to go back to the Lincoln Project. We don't need to convince 20% of the people. We need to convince 5% of the people.
Right.
And
exactly.
I simply think there is a deep enough well of decency. I think it was Maya Angelou or somebody said, I may forget what you say and I may forget what you do, but I'll never forget how you made me feel. And I think this president is making people feel, a lot of people feel bad. And I'm just hopeful that, and I think we'll see some shenanigans on election day, but there was a major company yesterday that's going to give all their workers the day off with pay if they agree to be poll watchers. It was announced yesterday. I heard it on NPR, some radio station I was listening to here in Vermont. I think we've got to get people in the polls watching. You know, we've got to watch the process. But I honestly think if this goes the way I would have predicted 10 years ago in these circumstances, without Facebook, without YouTube, without all that stuff, it would be a Goldwater wipeout.
Right.
I mean, I honestly think without the Google, FaceTube, YouTube stuff, this would be a Goldwater wipeout.
Yeah. Yeah, well, may it be so. May it be so. I'll be thinking of you on November 3rd. Um,
Okay,
4 years ago, we watched the returns at our friend's house that I mentioned before,
yeah,
our Republican friends, who very much, and only hope, I'm going to send them the link to this conversation because I really hope that they'll rethink their positions on this. They're too good of people. When you talk about people who are decent, fundamentally decent, they are. And we just have to have those kinds of conversations because you're
yeah,
right. We have to change 20% of America and we won't. But we do need to change 5. And
that's right.
4 years ago, when it became clear unthinkable was going to happen, the martinis began to flow and the hangover lasted almost 4 years now. And so I'm looking forward to popping champagne on November 3rd. And
Amen, brother. Amen,
okay.
brother. I am.
Thank you very much
Okay,
for joining us, Peter. Really
thank you, sir.
appreciate it. And I look forward to doing a pledge drive with you at KSFR in person at the point that COVID
Okay,
goes away. So take care and enjoy
perfect.
Vermont.
I sure will. Paul, thanks so much for this opportunity. I
Oh,
appreciate it.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.